Welcome back to Things You Don't Know.
Today, we're looking at coffee, not just as a drink, but as a force in history.
Coffee is so ordinary that we almost forget that it had to be discovered, developed, traded, argued over, banned, blessed, taxed, planted, roasted, and turned into a daily ritual.
And ladies and gentlemen, its history is surprisingly wide. It touches Ethiopia, Yemen, the Islamic world, Europe, colonial plantations, American work culture, religion, and modern global trade.
Most importantly, coffee was not born as the drink we know. The roasted bean was a human invention. That step, roasting, changed coffee from a stimulating plant into one of the world's most important beverages.
And so today we'll follow coffee from legend to monastery, from roasted beans to coffee houses, from empire to modern cafes, and we'll also look at why some religious groups, including Latter-day Saints, avoid coffee.
Chandler, let's begin where most coffee histories begin in Ethiopia. The famous story involves a goat herder named Kaldi in the 5th century who supposedly noticed that his goats became unusually energetic and even danced after eating red berries from a certain shrub.
The Chaldean story is probably legend, not confirmed history, but it points to something real. Coffee's plant origins are strongly tied to Ethiopia, and early people likely noticed that the fruit or seed had stimulating effects long before coffee even became a brewed drink.
That distinction matters. At first, coffee was not necessarily roasted, ground, and brewed. People may have chewed the fruit, made rough infusions, or mixed parts of the plant with food. The first discovery was likely pretty simple. This plant helps people stay awake.
According to later tradition, Orthodox monks use coffee like preparations to stay alert during prayer. Whether the exact story is true or not, the religious setting makes sense. Long prayer, night worship, and disciplined study all create a need for wakefulness.
So, coffee's earliest reputation was not morning beverage. It was more like spiritual stamina.
Exactly. Coffee begins as a stimulant plant, but the drink we know required another discovery, roasting the bean.
And that brings us to Yemen, where coffee becomes more historically visible and more organized.
Absolutely, Dr. Deneen. Now, Dr. Weaver, this is the part that people often tend to skip. How did anyone discover that coffee beans should be roasted?
Well, there's no reliable record of one person inventing coffee roasting. It was almost certainly gradual. People have already roasted grains, seeds, spices, and other foods. At some point, coffee seeds were heated, perhaps while drying them near a fire, perhaps through deliberate experimentation. Who knows?
Now, raw coffee beans are very different from roasted ones. They're hard, greenish colored, grassy smelling seeds inside a coffee cherry. If you simply boil them raw, they do not produce the aroma, flavor, or color we associate with coffee.
Roasting changed everything. Heat dried the beans, darkened them, made them easier to grind, and released stronger aromas. It also changed the chemistry of the bean, creating richer flavors that made coffee appealing as a drink.
A useful comparison is bread. Grain is useful, but bread becomes something different when heat transforms it. Coffee follows a similar logic. The plant was useful, but roasting made it desirable.
That's a good analogy, Dr. Weaver, and Yemen appears to be central to the development of roasting. By the 15th century, coffee was being cultivated, roasted, brewed, and traded there. The port of Mocha became especially important in the early coffee trade.
So, Ethiopia gives us the plant origin, and Yemen helps turn coffee into a disciplined beverage culture.
Yeah, that's probably the cleanest way to put it. Roasting was adopted because it worked. Better flavor, better aroma, easier grinding, and a more satisfying drink.
And once people realized roasted coffee could keep them awake while also becoming a social drink, it spread very quickly. Now, coffee's first major cultural home was in the Islamic world. In Yemen, Sufi communities used coffee to stay awake during long nights of prayer and devotional dance practices.
And that religious use is important because it gave coffee respectability. It was not merely just a pleasure drink, it was connected to discipline, focus, and worship.
From Yemen, coffee spread through trade and pilgrimage routes into cities such as Mecca, Cairo, Damascus, and Constantinople. These were major centers of religion, commerce, and intellectual life at the time.
And as coffee spread, coffee houses appeared. These were not just places to drink, they were places to talk like British clubs, listen to the news, debate politics, hear poetry, play games, discuss religion and philosophy.
In that sense, coffee houses became centers of communication. Before radio, television, or social media, people needed physical spaces where information could move quickly. Coffee houses served that role.
This also made them suspicious of the authorities. A room full of alert people discussing politics is rarely comforting to rulers.
For those reasons, at times there were attempts to restrict or ban coffee houses. The concern was not only the drink itself, but the social energy around it.
So, from early on, coffee had two sides: private stimulation and public conversation.
Yeah, it helped people stay awake and it gave them somewhere to be awake together. Now, I got just a really quick little interesting note, perhaps. When I was an undergraduate, my fraternity ran a coffee house in an abandoned railroad station that was on the
Wow.
campus. Yeah, and
Mm.
we reformed it. We built a stage. We put stained glass windows in it. We served coffee. We served tea also, but some other things. I just thought I would add that in.
So, you had it on and popping at that place, didn't you, Dr. Weaver?
Yep.
All right. Well, Dr. Deneen, how does coffee move into Europe?
Now that's an interesting story. It happens through trade with the Ottoman world, especially through Mediterranean commercial routes. By the 17th century, coffee was appearing in cities throughout Europe, including Venice, London, Paris, and Vienna.
Europe's first reaction was pretty much mixed. Some people admired coffee. Others saw it as foreign, bitter, suspicious, or morally dangerous. There's a famous story that some Christians called it a dangerous Muslim drink, and that Pope Clement the Eighth supposedly tasted it and approved it.
Regardless of whether or not that story happened as it was told, it still shows that coffee crossed religious and cultural boundaries. A drink associated with the Islamic world became part of European life.
Once accepted, coffee spread quickly. In England, coffee houses became known as penny universities because a person could buy a cup, look for a job, and join a serious conversation.
Merchants, writers, scientists, politicians, and ordinary citizens gathered in these places. Coffee houses contributed to journalism, insurance markets, political discussion, and scientific exchange.
That is one of the most interesting parts of the story. Coffee did not invent modern public life, but it helped create spaces where modern public life could happen.
You're exactly right, Chandler. Coffee houses were engines of conversation. They helped connect trade, the news, ideas, and arguments on many subjects.
Tea became associated with ceremony and domestic life in many settings. Coffee, especially in coffee houses, became associated with debate, commerce, public discussion, and in the 70s, probably entertainment too. So, Dr. Deneen, this is where the history becomes less pleasant. Europe wanted coffee, but most of Europe could not grow it. Coffee needs particular climates, often tropical or subtropical, and often higher elevations.
That's true, Dr. Weaver, and that demand pushed European powers to cultivate coffee in their colonies. Coffee spread to the Caribbean, South America, parts of Asia, and other regions throughout the world tied to imperial trade.
And this is where plantation labor enters the story. In many places, coffee production is connected to enslaved labor, coerced labor, and exploitative colonial systems.
The same beverage that fueled Enlightenment conversation in Europe also depended, in many cases, on brutal labor systems overseas.
There's no getting away from that. That contradiction is central, Dr. Weaver. Coffee houses could be places of liberty, argument, and exposure to new ideas, but the coffee itself often came through networks of empire and human suffering.
So, coffee history is not just about taste, it is about power. Who controlled the land? Who controlled trade? Who profited? And who worked?
Precisely. Coffee became a global commodity because millions of people planted, harvested, processed, packed, shipped, bought, and sold it. Many of those workers had little control over the profits.
And that legacy matters today. Modern coffee and coffee working conditions have improved in many ways, but the questions of fair wages, exploitation of small farmers, land use, and global pricing still remain important.
So, when we talk about coffee as a daily comfort, we should also remember the labor behind it.
Absolutely. Chandler, now let's turn to the beans themselves. Coffee is not one uniform product. Bean type, soil, climate, elevation, processing, and roasting all shape the flavor.
The two major commercial types are Arabica and Robusta. Arabica is usually considered smoother and more complex, while Robusta is stronger, more bitter, higher in caffeine, and often used in espresso blends or instant coffee.
There are also less common types, such as Liberica and Excelsa, but Arabica and Robusta dominate the global market for sure.
Region matters as well. Ethiopian coffees are often described as bright, floral, or fruity. Yemeni coffees can be earthy, spicy, and complex, with the old port of Mocha giving its name to one of coffee's most famous traditions.
Colombian and Central American coffees are often known for balance, medium body, pleasant acidity, and flavors people describe as citrus, nut, caramel, or chocolate.
Brazil is one of the world's largest coffee producers and is often associated with nutty, chocolatey profiles and large scale production for sure.
Indonesia, especially Sumatra, is known for heavier bodied coffees with earthy or herbal qualities. Vietnam is especially important for Robusta and has a strong coffee culture of its own, including coffee served with sweetened condensed milk.
And we should also include Hawaii. Coffee was introduced to Hawaii in the 19th century, and Kona coffee from the Big Island became especially famous. The volcanic soil, elevation, rainfall, and climate helped create a smooth, aromatic coffee that is often mild and carefully cultivated.
Hawaiian coffee is also significant because Hawaii is one of the few places in the United States, in fact, I think it may be the only one, where coffee is grown commercially in a very serious way.
So, if I'm hearing you rightly, Dr. Weaver, when someone drinks coffee, they're really drinking other factors: geography, soil, weather, altitude, labor, processing, and roasting all in one cup.
Now, coffee was present in colonial America, but it gained special importance as tea became politically charged. After conflicts with Britain, especially around taxation, drinking coffee could feel more patriotic than drinking tea.
Check out some of our Revolutionary War podcasts to learn more about that. That does not mean every cup was a political statement, but coffee and coffee drinking did become increasingly American over time.
In the 19th and 20th centuries, coffee became tied to work. It was served in homes, diners, offices, factories, churches, military camps, and later convenience stores and drive throughs too.
Yeah, and the coffee break became part of work culture. It gave people a short pause, a social moment, and a way to reset during the day.
Instant coffee also played a role, especially in the 20th century. It was convenient, portable, and useful during wartime and in mass society.
Then came the rise of specialty coffee, espresso drinks, chain cafes, single origin beans, home brewing equipment, and an entire culture built around preference and ritual.
Modern coffee is both practical and symbolic. It means waking up, working, meeting a friend, studying, taking a break, or starting a routine.
And it's still a stimulant. Caffeine blocks adenosine receptors in the brain, which reduces the feeling of tiredness. It does not create true energy, but changes how fatigue is experienced.
Used moderately, coffee can be useful and enjoyable. Used excessively, it can contribute to jitters, anxiety, stomach irritation, dependence, and poor sleep.
So, coffee is strong because it is both biological and cultural. It affects the body, but it also organizes daily life.
Yeah, brewing techniques have morphed over the years. First, it was brewed by boiling in a pan, if you can imagine. Then came percolating and drippolating. Then electric coffee makers, which are essentially automated drippolators. Espresso is pressure brewed. And of course, there are those individual cup types.
Dr. Weaver, one part of coffee history that people often ask about is religion, especially why members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints, more popularly known as Mormons, avoid coffee.
The answer comes from a health code known as the Word of Wisdom, which began with an 1833 revelation received by Joseph Smith. It advises against alcohol, tobacco, and what it calls hot drinks.
Church leaders came to interpret hot drinks specifically as coffee and tea. It does not simply mean just any hot beverage, and it is not the same as saying no caffeine.
That distinction matters. There's never been a prohibition against cocoa or caffeinated sodas. Some caffeinated drinks have not been treated the same way. The religious restriction is focused on coffee and tea.
Like many religious dietary rules, the practice has several meanings. It can be about health, Discipline, obedience, identity, and community, I guess.
I would think so, Dr. Weaver. And because coffee is so common in American culture, not drinking it becomes a visible daily practice. It marks belonging and commitment in ordinary life.
That is similar to other religious practices involving food and drink, kosher laws among Judaism, halal in Islam, vegetarianism among Hindus and Jainists. What people avoid can become as meaningful as what they actually consume.
Yeah, you missed one too, Dr. Deneen. Friday night meat abstention in Catholicism for a long time, right?
Yes, indeed. And it happens now, today, during Lent, but it used to be every Friday. You're right about that.
Yeah. It also reflects 19th century concerns about bodily discipline, stimulants, alcohol, and tobacco. Coffee was not always seen as harmless or ordinary.
So, for Latter day Saints, avoiding coffee is not just about the drink itself, it's about faith expressed through daily habits and rituals.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Dr. Deneen, when we put the whole story together, coffee begins as a plant associated with Ethiopia, becomes a roasted and brewed drink in Yemen, spreads through the Islamic world, enters Europe, and becomes part of global culture.
And along the way, it becomes tied to prayer, conversation, politics, trade, empire, exploitation, work, and identity.
The roasting step is crucial. Without roasting, coffee might have remained a regional stimulant plant. With roasting, it became aromatic, drinkable, portable, tradable, and socially powerful.
And coffee also shows how everyday objects can carry hidden history. A cup of coffee can connect us to Ethiopian highlands, Yemeni ports, Ottoman coffee houses, European debates, Caribbean plantations, Brazilian farms, Hawaiian volcanic slopes, and the modern workplace.
It is certainly a drink, but it is also a network of land, labor, culture, faith, biology, and commerce.
And that is why coffee deserves more than a casual glance. It's one of those ordinary things that quietly shaped the modern world.
So the next time you drink a cup of coffee, remember, you're not just drinking roasted beans, you're drinking centuries of experimentation, trade, argument, devotion, labor, and ritual.
For things you don't know, I'm Dr. Sean Denis.
And I'm Dr. William Weaver. Thanks for joining us.
And I am Chandler Foster. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, subscribe, and come back for a lot more challenging and interesting topics.